The cervical plexus is a group of the spinal nerves formed by the anterior rami of the upper four cervical spinal nerves C1, C2, C3, and C4. The deep branches of these nerves form the muscular nerves, and superficial branches are mostly sensory. The first spinal nerve, called the suboccipital nerve, exits the spinal cord between the skull and atlas to supply the muscles of suboccipital triangle. Some fibers of the first cranial nerve descend along with the hypoglossal nerve, forming the superior root of the ansa cervicalis, a loop of nerves in front of the carotid sheath. The ansa cervicalis is motor for the infrahyoid muscles. The inferior root of the ansa cervicalis is formed by fibers from spinal nerves C2 and C3. The phrenic nerve descends through the thorax and supplies the diaphragm, actively participating in breathing. The superficial branches of the cervical plexus are all sensory and appear along the posterior margin of the sternocleidomastoid. They include the lesser occipital nerve. It passes along the posterior margin of the sternocleidomastoid and continues upward along the side of the head to innervate the region of the scalp posterior and superior to the ear, here. The greater occipital nerve ascends along the trapezius to innervate the scalp at the top of the head. The greater auricular nerve passes around the sternocleidomastoid and ascends to innervate the skin over both surfaces of the ear and the skin over the parotid gland. Transverse cervical nerve passes around the sternocleidomastoid and innervates the skin over the anterior region of the neck. And finally, supraclavicular nerves. They descend to innervate the skin over the superior region of the chest and shoulder. Here they are. Additionally, some cranial nerves are passing through the neck. First of all, the accessory nerve. It crosses the internal jugular vein around the level of the posterior belly of digastric muscle, then it courses caudally and visits the sternocleidomastoid muscle, sending its motor branches, and continues inferiorly until it reaches the trapezius muscle to provide motor innervation to its upper portion. The hypoglossal nerve appears in the upper part of the neck. It passes deep to the posterior belly of the digastric muscle and enters the submandibular region. Then it passes lateral to the hyoglossus muscle and inferior to the lingual nerve to reach and innervate the muscles of tongue. The vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve, it enters the carotid sheath between the internal and external carotid arteries. Then it descends posterolateral to the common carotid artery to the thorax. At the thoracic outlet, the vagus nerve gives rise to the recurrent laryngeal nerves, which hook around the subclavian artery on the right and the arch of aorta on the left, and return back to the neck to innervate the muscles of larynx.